Sebastian, here's a question for you. How did you compare the kind of impact photos could, sorry, how did you compare the kind of impact that photos could make compared with the impact of the audio? And has it made you think about the way you need to report and tell stories from here?
I mean, that is a great question. Every medium has their own strengths and weaknesses. One of the reasons that I thought radio to begin with is that I had audio, right? I had the audio of Kamaran from the front line when he was shot, and I had the audio of the phone call. So it made sense to me that radio would be the way to do it. Secondary to that, and I was a huge fan of narrative radio, independent, just as a consumer, not as a producer of it, but as a consumer. I mean, I started listening to This American Life when I was a sophomore in college, and then the whole podcast revolution. And I remember when Rough Translation started. I remember their first season blew my mind. I think each medium has their strength. And in this particular situation, the photographs were not going to be the way to tell the story. And yeah, I'll just leave it there for that. And if there's a follow-up question, we can talk about it.
Okay. There was a follow-up comment from Amy Yee who liked your answers and said, I hope editors are listening. I don't know if they are or not, but Sebastian, I mentioned early on about the rift, the division between the family and the friends, and how, things went in not exactly two different directions, but, you weren't talking to each other. Ahmed was a bit of a go-between, but, and eventually you found out what that was all about. Can you talk about that? And I just, because you thought it was sort of one thing, right? Or there were certain reasons, and then you learned it was different.
So we had a little bit of help at the very beginning, just a little bit of assistance. And one of the media organization out of the Netherlands was able to put us in touch with a British hostage negotiator who would just advise us for a couple of months on how to run things. And he was just a great resource in terms of just advice on what to do. He wasn't going to be doing any negotiating on our behalf, but he was just more the background advisor. And one of the first things he said to me, is make sure that you as non-family, you guys run the show, and that the family are kept separate. They have a representative who you report to, and then they report to the family, because the amount of stress and anxiety and tension is going to make it very difficult to work with the family. And what happened in this case is that Kamaran's family completely understandably wanted to take control. We became the group of friends. We had resources that they didn't. Iraqi, very talented Iraqi journalists who had contacts throughout the whole country, had contacts within ISIS, had contacts within top military leadership. We could access things that the family couldn't. So we started off working together, and we ended up falling out, and for a very long time working against each other and undermining each other. And that anger and resentment that I felt towards the family, who did some very aggressive, very nasty things to me and to Kamaran's fiance and to Ahmed as well, that stayed with me as a solid, unmovable thought for many, many years. And it was actually the last bit of reporting I did for the story, as I went back to Iraq to interview Kamaran's one of his older brothers, who was sort of the head of the family unit that was very much against us. And it was in interviewing him and then talking to Karen and Gregory about it on tape afterwards, I realized that, not I realized, but I saw for the first time what it must have been like from their perspective to go through this and to have people who are not their family working on it. And I also saw in a much deeper way the risks that they were taking and what they were fearful of. I hadn't appreciated just what level of risk they were taking. So I got to, in reporting the story, actually have a personal moment of understanding their side.
Yeah. And that older brother, I think you say in the piece, or somebody says in the piece, he's the only one who still believes that, or at least at the time of the broadcast, the only one who still believed that Kamaran was alive?
Yes. Yeah, Najat is very, very religious, and his faith has really been able to help him keep this positive outlook that Kamaran's still alive. But neither I nor Ahmed believe that Kamaran's still alive. I don't know about his. He has many, many, many brothers. I don't know what they all think. Our relationship is it's better that we're not in touch with each other.
Yeah. Are there any, I don't remember when this ran. This story aired in 2019, right?
Yep, in June of 2019.
June, okay. So a year ago. Has anything happened since? Is there any news? Do people still get tips? You know, or is anybody still actively investigating?
No one is actually actively investigating to find Kamaran alive. Ahmed for a while was going to different exhumations of mass graves to try to figure out if Kamaran's remains were there. But unfortunately, with the resurgence of ISIS and ISIS-style groups in Iraq, the area where we think Kamaran's body is most likely is now controlled by these resurgent ISIS groups, and it's way too dangerous to even go there.
And on what basis do you think it is in that place? I mean, what led you to that?
Basically, because we never received proof of life after that first phone call. We had tips that took us all over northern Iraq. So we were from Kirkuk to Hawija to Mosul. We even heard tips that he was in Syria. You know, we moved around a lot, but were never able to get one single piece of like a real proof of life, a video, a photograph, anything. So we, with some advice, realized that most likely Kamaran died very, very early on in his captivity. And if he died very early on in his captivity, we think we know the area where he died. But even if the area were safe, to be perfectly honest, and we could go there, it would still be, you know, a needle in a haystack in terms of locating his remains.